So you mentioned the transition into writing. I'm wondering, was there a trigger that really you can recall, a trigger that led you to start putting that pen to paper?
If it was hard for me to take pen and paper, then I wouldn't do it. It's a natural extension of who I am. It's what I was meant to do with my life. I tried it out. It wasn't a good fit for me, and I moved on. There's a huge difference between that and quitting because something gets too hard, right?
Yeah, right.
I feel that you can spend 25 years trying to write one book and have it be absolutely perfect. No, 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 no. I think that's completely bananas.
Hello, welcome Team ET to this yet another week. And, you know, as we wind down now towards the end of December, I think we're 3 weeks before the end of the year when this recording is released. And therefore, we're only 2 weeks away before the jolly old guy comes searching for the chimney or the open window. And I think, you know, it's been so big of a year. And this week, well, there's just so many clients looking to tidy up loose ends, right? So one fascinating connection that I've found in all the business is that for a large portion of the leaders, they're finally getting the opportunity to take a breather. And, you know, as leaders, we all know the importance of being able to do that, relax with family and friends for a couple of weeks and put aside all the craziness. So one thing that I'm hoping you'll probably find time to do during this period is catch up on some reading. So with that lead in, Team ET, let's welcome our guest, fictional writer, John Leister, to the show. Hello, John. Welcome to the ET Project.
Hi, Wayne. Thank you so much for having me as your guest. It's a great honor, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you. I mentioned the fact that many of our listeners will be reading, John, their favorite books, hopefully coming with the holidays. I'm guessing that's going to be music to your ears as a writer. And I'm wondering, in the book industry, is it similar to the entertainment industry with the release of a lot of new titles that hit the shelves around this time of the year?
Well, I mean, I really don't have very much of a readership to speak of right now. You know, I've made a few sales. I started doing this in 2019, and
Okay.
but the feedback that I've gotten from the people who have actually paid attention to some of my writing has been mostly positive. I hate to say this, this is going to sound a little self-aggrandizing, but I'm just reporting. Someone actually posted on my Facebook page today. He had read an excerpt from my most recently Hacklin. He wrote, "You're the Mickey Spillane of this generation." And I just
Wow.
about lost my mind when I read that. And that's my message to people out there. For goodness sakes, you know, follow your bliss. You know, I didn't start doing this until I was 53. I always knew that I was meant to do something creative with my life. And ever since I started doing it, it's become like a drug for me, but a wonderful drug, not a destructive drug, you know, a bliss following drug. And it has, like I said, it has not made me a lot of money. I'm still a full-time security guard, but pretty much every day for the last 4 years now, every time I open up my dollar store duotang, I crank out 3, 4 pages, and then at home at night, I transcribe it onto my laptop, and I'm using a website called Draft2 Digital. I started with Amazon. For anybody out there who wants to be a self-published author, it's up to you, but I don't recommend Amazon. At least for me, I had a lot of hiccups with them initially. And what Draft2 Digital does is they springboard your books to different platforms. So my books are on Apple and Kobo and Barnes and Noble and a few others. And I'm also reading excerpts from my books onto my phone and posting them onto my Facebook page and sharing them with other writers groups around the world. This is what I was meant to do with my life. And I always knew it, but I didn't feel it until 4 years ago when I kind of hit quote unquote emotional bottom. I don't mean to play the world's smallest violin, but I was just spending way too much time by myself. I was very overweight. I used to weigh about, say, 250 pounds. I'm a recovering sugarholic, and I just ensconced myself in this kind of vicarious existence. I mean, I don't mean to paint a picture of myself as a total pariah or an outcast. I had a semblance of a social life, but I just got used to making enough money to keep my head above the water, and I was addicted to junk food and just watching DVDs night after night. And then one day around 2005, I just started writing these short stories at work one day because I just was understimulated. And I discovered well, I didn't really discover. I think I always knew that I could do this. I didn't know that I could be so prolific. And I didn't realize how much more fun my life is now than what it was before 2019 when I was a couch potato. I thought I was having fun back then, even though I always knew there's a little voice in my mind telling me that I could do better, that I could do a lot better. But I lived my life that way because it was fun, because it was instant gratification. The
Yeah.
fun that I'm having now, reaching out to nice people like yourself and sharing my stories and sharing my quote unquote ideas. I have a group page on Facebook, by the way, called Johnny's Way. All your listeners out there, please feel free to join. I have over 700 members, and I write what I like to think are uplifting and inspirational essays on self manifestation that I think anybody can benefit from, but particularly people my age, people who might be in their 40s and 50s. I think a lot of us are kind of thinking, well, gosh, when I was young, I had all these opportunities and I didn't really take advantage of them. And now I'm in this quote unquote comfort zone. My message to the world is that it's not too late. And for me, all I needed to do to become the John Leister that I always knew I could be, a creator versus, again, a couch potato. All I needed to do, and I don't mean to be pushy or preachy about this stuff, Wayne, was I reached out to God. I took a leap of faith and I said, God, I don't know if I'm talking to myself right now. I've heard about you my whole life, but I think that I'm the kind of person who tries a little bit harder if I have it in my mind's eye that someone who loves me, who accepts me unconditionally for who I am, warts and all, psoriasis and all. I have psoriasis, incidentally. That's kind of been a bear in my life, um, is rooting for me and all of us to at least make some effort towards manifesting whatever it is that we were meant to do with our lives, versus doing nothing at all. So for me, do
Mm.
you know 1984 by George Orwell?
Yes.
Right? Big Brother is watching you. That's how I describe my relationship with God, but in a good way, in a positive way, not in a harsh, punitive way. It's like, oh, you said something politically incorrect. We're going to throw you in the Siberian gulag. No, not like that at all. Kind of like Yoda in Luke Skywalker's rucksack, whispering in my ear all the time, don't give up. And when I tried my first book here, was shamelessly plugging this product, plug, The Collected Cases of Lee Hackland, 1970s Private Investigators, my first book. It's a collection of short stories. And when I tried to post that first book, it was a tremendous uphill battle for me because I'm just not a tech savvy guy. And so I was going to the library every day after work and on my days off, asking library staff to help me. If I didn't have God in my life, if I didn't have this sense that the creator of the universe, for real, I don't mean this in a figurative way. I mean this in a literal way. Like God himself, the good Lord, is watching me and he's watching with his arms folded. Well, what are you going to do, John? You have all these hiccups. It's not working. The book is not being published. Are you going to give up? And so sometimes we men, we have to put our egos on the shelf sometimes, and we have to ask people for help. And I feel that that's also an important life lesson too. If I hadn't asked people to help me get that first darn book online, you would probably be interviewing somebody else right now. And like I said initially, I was using Amazon, and they were telling me that it was the wrong banking information. And then I would go to the bank, and they say, no, it's the right information. And I was spinning my wheels. And if there's such a thing, I'm losing my mind in the process. And if there's such a thing as parallel universes or parallel timelines like Back to the Future or Star Trek, and I didn't have God in my life, knowing who I was before 2019, and I don't mean to sound overly self-denigrating, Wayne, but I probably would have given up after two or three tries. And this is what happens for a lot. I know it's not just me. You start off on a new adventure, some new creative endeavor, and we have to have it in our mind's eye that there are going to be hiccups, right? There are going to be unforeseen obstacles, and it's okay. We need that stuff. It's a part of the journey. And so that when we cross the finish line, that's what makes if we cross the finish line, that's what makes that feeling so much more satisfying. So
Right.
because I had God in my life, I kept at it and kept at it. And after about a month, I must have tried like 100 times. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's what I was doing. And then finally, one magical day, I saw this window on the screen. Congratulations, your ebook has been published. And I just lost my mind. I said, you got to be kidding me. I thought I must be dreaming. This can't really be happening. And so, have you seen the movie Billy Elliot about the boy who wants to be a ballet dancer?
We spoke about that last time, but no, I
Okay.
haven't seen it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful film. I highly recommend it. Well, anyway, spoiler warning. There's a scene where his dad takes him to a very prestigious ballet school in London at the end of the film. And the auditioners ask him, well, Billy, how do you feel when you dance? And he says, well, I feel like electricity. And that's how I felt when I posted this first book at 53. And I thought, gosh darn it. So that's what this feels like. There's some people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Who's the epitome of a self-believing self-manifester. There are some people who live their whole lives that way, right? They have a goal, they have a vision in their mind's eye, they move towards it, right? There's setbacks, you move forward, there's a little hill there, but they don't give up, right?
Right.
And if they don't have the information that they need, then they try to get the information that they need. They don't throw in the towel. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of my story in a nutshell. And now I've got over 100 of these books up now. I just published another one today. It's called Lee Hacklin, Private Investigator in Papa Wolf, Mama Wolf, Baby Wolf, where this boy who is raised by wolves, the plane crash in the Himalayas, and he's rescued, and then he's accused of a murder that he didn't commit, and Lee's hired to prove his innocence. This is what I was meant to do with my life. I'm still working security, but I have it in my mind's eye that my stories, look, you have to believe in what you're doing. I absolutely believe, just like George Lucas did when he tried to sell Star Wars back in the day. Nobody wanted to make Star Wars. Everybody told George Lucas, "Oh, these movies are done. Movies about good and evil and outer space. Are you kidding? Nobody wants to see this." And you just have to hook up with that one person. And in George Lucas's case, it was Fox executive Alan Ladd Jr. He's like, "Okay, here you go, George. Here's $8 million. Go make your stupid space movie that we know nobody wants to see." And lo and behold, it became, like, for the time, the most successful movie of all time. Audiences around the world were hungry. They were starving for that kind of story. And now Star Wars is still continuing in all kinds of iterations. And you already know this, Wayne, but just for your listeners, all of those people, the writers and the actors and the people who design the video games and the people who write and draw the comic books and on and on and on. I mean, you go into a bookstore and you look at the Star Wars books, there's like hundreds and hundreds of Star Wars books out there, right? All of those people absolutely love what they're doing. And it's because of one man who had this nutty vision that he believed in. And, George Lucas could have thrown in the towel after 2 or 3 tries, right? It's like, oh, I guess nobody wants, but he didn't. He stayed with it. And so am I comparing myself to George Lucas? Financially, no, obviously not. But in terms of my faith, that my stories are good enough. They're not great literature. I'll be the first one to admit it. But I like to think that they're fun, and I like to think that they're the kinds of stories that Hollywood is not particularly keen on today. They're old school. They're mostly set in the 70s and the 80s. I don't like writing about technology. They're good guys. What I'm writing basically is pulp fiction. It's good guys and bad guys. My heroes are really good, and my villains are absolutely horrible and irredeemable. And then the other characters, I try to give them a little more idiosyncratic natures. But those, I'm writing for myself at the end of the day.
Let me pause you for a moment. We're going to dive deeper into the books in a moment, but I would love to just go back to your story a little bit and unpack that. So the first question I had for you was, what do you do in Christmas time? How do you spend your time? You're in Vancouver. What does Christmas look like for John?
This is a very cold answer. I'm usually working on Christmas Day, and I'm all too happy to work Christmas Day because it's, double time and a half. So, so for me, Christmas time is a big payday. Now, in a more ideal world, look, I would love to be married and have kids and the Christmas tree and watch the kids. I would absolutely trade, that reality for that hypothetical fantasy. But basically, that's how I spend my Christmas pretty much. And I have a few friends that I might see before Christmas Day, but I try to work on the statutory holidays. How about yourself? Are you married with kids?
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
wife
good
and
for you.
daughter.
Well, I,
Yeah,
I envy you. I have yet to ring that bell.
yeah, very good. So, what about sport? Do you play? You follow sport? You're a ice hockey
No.
fan? I think
Nothing. I, I,
what
you know,
what's
I have nothing but love and respect for athletes and the amazing things that they can do, but I've never really had any interest in sports, which has been
mm,
kind of a cross to bear for me as a child because I'm Canadian, and if you're a Canadian boy and you're not a hockey fan, some
yeah,
people just will not accept you. They really, it's like the scarlet letter. They don't like it. Shakespeare, what's that line? This above all to thine own self be true, right? That's great in theory, but in practice, it can be a bit of a bear. When I was a boy, I loved comic books and movies, and then as I got older, novels. I've always loved stories. Now, I
mm,
used to play tennis, I used to be a very avid tennis player. I always been into racket sports. I guess if I had, I guess I would tend to lean more towards individual sports over
Okay,
team sport.
right.
I can't watch 5 minutes of a football game or a hockey game. I'm not emotionally invested. The puck goes
Yeah.
in one net or the puck goes in the other net. I don't. It just doesn't mean anything to me. And I'm not critical. Again, I other people are into it. Different strokes. So I'm not a sport. I was into UFC for a while. I've always liked martial arts, and so I was
Mhm.
watching UFC for a few years. But even then, I hit a saturation point. I just had enough. I like movies about sports. I'll watch like Rocky. I've seen all the Rockies many times. But no, I just I just didn't come to this world with that gene. How about yourself?
Um, Opposite, I would say. So,
Hmm.
very heavily involved in sports in my younger years. Not so much now, of course, too grey for the sport, but I don't watch it a lot. I'm more of a reader these
Yeah,
days and a
same here.
researcher. Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
So
I'm glad that I'm not a sports fan because if I was a sports fan, I'd be watching all these games and I'd be spending less time writing.
exactly. So during your childhood, was the writing something that you were doing? Like, did you start writing as a child? When did that start?
Yes, but I would say that I was doing a lot more drawing. I was really into comic books, and I had it in my mind's eye when I was a boy that I was going to be a comic book artist, and I drew every day for 3 or 4 hours. And I don't know what happened. I guess I was a little too extroverted back then. I guess I decided that I wanted to hang out with my friends, which I kind of regret a little bit because I was pretty good at drawing. But
Hmm.
when I graduated high school, I actually tried acting for a couple of years. There was a show from the 1960s called The Big Valley. Do you know that show? It was a Western, an American Western. And
Yeah.
one of the stars of that show, Peter Breck, he came to Vancouver and he started an acting school called the Breck Academy. And I walked past this acting school one day. I don't know, I was 21, 22 years old. My life wasn't really going anywhere. And so I walked in, and lo and behold, I signed up for acting classes. And I loved acting. Now, and I was, to answer your question, I was doing some writing back then too. In fact, when I was going to auditions, I didn't get the part, but the casting director would say to me, I've never heard that monologue before. And I said, well, it's because I wrote it. And they always seem to be impressed by that. Maybe they're just being
Right.
nice. I was an extra in Rocky Four. The big fight at the end was shot in Vancouver. So I got to see Stallone and Ivan Drago duke it out in the ring. But again, getting back to the psoriasis, which I've always had very, very dry skin. To any of your listeners who don't know what that is, it's basically some of our bodies generate much more skin than would be considered normal. So we wind up with these red and white scaly patches all over our bodies. Well, when I got to like 24, 25 years old, I mean, my mindset was not very positive as a young man. My half glass of water had a tendency to be half empty, and I just stressed out. Everything was drama, and in my mind, everything was an apocalypse. And my diet was horrible. Like I said, I'm a recovering junk food junkie. And so I just like I would go to auditions, like I don't mean to gross you out or gross out your listeners, but like literally pieces of skin were falling off my face in front of the camera. That's how bad it was. So I
Wow.
gave up on my career of acting, and I've just, like I said, I've been a security guard for 35 years, and it's still my bread and butter job. But I always knew in my heart, mind, and soul that I was meant to do something creative. And looking back now, I realize that it's always been writing. It's been writing from the get-go. And I could have started publishing these books years and years ago, but I didn't because I didn't have the mindset. I mean, I did have the mindset because I was reading all these self-help books. I was reading Awake, what is it, Anthony Robbins? Do you know him? Awaken the Giant Within and Unlimited Power and Deepak Chopra, and all these, I was trying to fill my head with as much positivity as I could. And I would make these little baby steps here and there, like one step forward, two steps back. Like I would join a gym, or I did kickboxing for a couple of years in the early 2000s, or like I said, I took acting classes. But the psoriasis and my feelings of low self-esteem and just dwelling on the past, I just was, some of us get caught into our routines, and sometimes it takes something very specific for us to break free of whatever
Yeah.
chains that we've created for ourselves. And for me, as I said earlier, it was loneliness. I was just spending too much time by myself. And I discovered that just sitting on my couch every night and watching all these DVDs and the special features, the audio commentaries and the deleted scenes and all that stuff, it just, I just hit a saturation point. And my message to the world is better late than never. And so my life has changed very dramatically since 2019. Like I said, I went to Australia. I never imagined I never imagined before 2019 that I would ever leave Canada or that I would have a passport. I'm going back early next year. And so, look, I had a conversation with this woman on Facebook one day, and she looked at my Indigo page, and she was very complimentary. She said, I had to look at your books, and you've really put out quite a lot over the last 4 years. She said she was 87. She's been a pharmacist her whole life. But what she really wanted to be was an author. And so I wrote her back, Herman Wouk, who's who's one of the greatest novelists of all time. He wrote his last book when he was 100 years old. You know, we have to live our lives in the present. We really have no choice if we want to manifest. As soon as we start thinking about the past, we lose power like a video game character. Or when we think about the future, maybe it's just me, but I think it's human nature to some degree. We tend to worry. It's easier for people, I feel. You may disagree with this, but it's easier for people to imagine all the things that can go wrong in our lives instead of imagining all the amazing directions our lives can take if we just have the guts to take those steps. And again, the key thing is to recognize in advance that it's not going to be easy. Like I said, there are going to be obstacles, and that it's okay. It's a part of the journey. The most important question that any human being can ask themselves, in my opinion, is this: am I enjoying the journey of my life? Never mind the destination, because we're all going to the same place, right? All our destinations are exactly the same. That's it. We're done, right? It could be today. It could be 10 years from now. All our power is right here in the here and now. And this is the way that I try to live my life. And this is why I'm reaching out to nice people like yourself. And if I'm still a security guard 10 years from now, if I'm lucky enough to still be alive 10 years from now, I'm still going to be doing this, and I'm still going to be writing because it's my bliss.
Right. So you mentioned the transition into writing. I'm wondering, was there a trigger that really you can recall, a trigger that led you to start putting that pen to paper?
Well, I mean, it's something that I did sporadically as a younger man. But as I
Right.
said, once I published that first book, I had no idea. I mean, I thought maybe I would do like two or three more. That might be the end of it, and then I would just spend the rest of my life marketing. Like I wrote my first novel, plug, plug, plug. My first novel is called The Treehouse Avengers, and it's very autobiographical story. It's not it's separate from the Lee Acklands. And I remember thinking, well, maybe this is it. Maybe I'll just write the one novel and then try to get it, mass media, try to get it made into a movie or TV series or reaching out to people. But then the whole idea of putting pen to paper for me, I've discovered over the last 4 years, is as natural to me as eating, sleeping, and breathing. I don't mean to sound too cocky about this. And I don't claim to be good at it. I just know that I can do it. This is another
Right.
important life lesson I feel. I don't have to will myself to do it.
Okay.
When you're doing something for the sake of its own joy that's giving you, that's all the proof you need that you need to do it. Whether it's writing or you're doing a podcast or if you want to become a neurosurgeon, whatever it is that you want to do with your life, all you need to go by is the feeling it gives you. Here's an example. I tried stand-up comedy. There's a bar a couple of blocks from here, and they had open mic, and I tried stand-up comedy 4 times. And I was excited. I thought, gosh, I can't believe I never thought about this before. I can do this. Because like I said, after I reached out to God, I had all these wild ideas. I tried to do. I also have a podcast, but I have my own podcast called the Johnny's Way Podcast. And so I tried stand-up comedy. I did it 4 times. I got very few laughs, and I discovered that it wasn't a good fit for me. I discovered that it's not my mission statement to make people laugh every 5 minutes. And I remember when I did that 4th time, and I was walking home, and I was bummed out. I was feeling depressed. I was thinking, well, here we go again. Is this another example of me, quitting when it's not what I expected to be? And I realized that it wasn't. I tried it out. It wasn't a good fit for me, and I moved on. There's a huge difference between that and quitting because something gets too hard, right?
Yeah.
If it was
Good.
hard,
Kudos to you.
if it was hard
Kudos.
for me to take pen and
Yeah.
paper, then I wouldn't do it. It's a natural extension of who I am. It's what I was meant to do with my life.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Thank
Let's
you.
get into the books a little bit. So, what is the genre that you
Oh,
write?
okay. Primarily, I'm writing detective stories. When I
Mhm.
was a younger man, do you know Robert B. Parker? He was a very prolific mystery writer. He created a character called, Spencer? Spencer, right? So I read those books back in the day, and Spencer is a very, he's a hard drinker and then but man's man, but he's got a heart of gold. He's a rugged, tough guy, but he's very compassionate and caring and sensitive and charming and funny. And I read those books back in the day, and Robert B. Parker wrote from a first person narrative, and I remember thinking, gosh, I think I can do this. I don't know if I could do it as well, a scintilla of a millimeter as well, but I could picture myself doing it. So,
Mm.
I grew up reading so many comic books, and I always loved the superhero genre. And I actually wrote a superhero trilogy called Morning Star's Night, which I'm very proud of. But I discovered as I was writing, I said, this is not really what I want to do. I want to write stories about real people with real. I don't want to explain like why someone can fly and has superpowers and all that stuff. I love that stuff as a fan, but I discovered that as a writer, it's the same with science fiction. I wrote a two-part science fiction series called The Red Star, Taking of Red Star 1, books 1 and 2. I'm super proud of those books. I think they turned out really well. Of course, I'm biased, like parents are biased about their children, right? But I discovered that writing science fiction was kind of a chore because you have to explain everything. You have to, how the ships are able to travel through space and how the weapons work and what life is like in the future. I was like, oh, this is kind of drudgery. I want to write about real people. So the thing about the detective genre that appeals to me as a writer. Well, Lee is basically me. He is my avatar. He is an idealized, much cooler, much handsomer, and much braver, much wittier version of myself, which is something that I think a lot of writers do. I'll bet that's what Ian Fleming did when he created James Bond, or Tom Clancy when he created a Jack Ryan. It's a wish fulfillment, and also it's for me as a writer, I find writing to be very therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
When I wrote Treehouse Avengers, it was a lot of about my childhood and my father and his temper and his abusive nature. I would say borderline sociopathic nature. I don't mean to throw him under the bus because he's not here to defend himself. I know he loved me, and I know he'd be super proud of me were he alive today. But he just was a very, very sensitive guy. You could say hello to him and it might set him off. Like he just there was a loose wire. And so writing that book for me was very therapeutic. It was a kind of purging. And I think that's what writers are doing a lot of the time. We're creating worlds that make sense to us. I think that's what Gene Roddenberry did when he created Star Trek back in the day, or Sherwood Schwartz when he created the Brady Bunch. And those are the kinds of stories that I liked. I like stories where the main character is someone that I look up to. So that's why I like superhero stories so much. Because as a kid, I would read a Superman comic book, and I think, well, gosh, why can't the world be like this? You never mind these muddy waters, and on the other hand, and moral relativism and all this nonsense. Why can't life be black and white? It's again, it's a wish fulfillment. So for me, the detective genre is kind of a bottomless well of stories because I just keep coming up with new ideas for it. I mean, they're new for me. I mean, I wrote one called The Righteous and the Canada Damned, where it ended with Lee, the flight crew of the plane that he's on as he's traveling from Vancouver back to New York is murdered by a Quebecois terrorist. And so Lee has to land the plane. Okay. Now, that's been done a million times before. But it was something new for Lee. And I was writing it, I got super excited. And that to me, that's the joy of writing. The way I write is very improvisational. I'm not really big on jazz music, but I understand that a lot of jazz music has an improvisational quality. I mean, I've been on other podcasts that were hosted by writers, and a lot of them they plot everything out in advance. Like these cards, this happens, and then this. And I can't write that way. To me, that would take all the fun out of writing. I start with a very general idea. Lee goes to prison. Why? He's a good guy, so he's been framed. Well, who framed him and why? It's just a seed of an idea, and then I'm off and running. And again, when I think back on the first 30 years of my life, spending so much time watching these DVDs and reading novels and movies and TV shows, now I'm just kind of regurgitating all this stuff back out, but it's through my own filter. And I never worry about being unoriginal. I would never stake any claim as to the originality of my stories. What makes them original is that they come from me. And I've heard people say this, oh, I love to write a book, but I don't have any original ideas. Are you kidding me? There's nothing original out there. Everything is similar to something that's come before. Before Batman, there was the Phantom, right?
Yeah.
And before the Phantom, there was Zorro. And before Zorro, there's Robin Hood. And it goes all the way back to David versus Goliath, right? Once you pick up that pen, or once you start typing away on your keyboard, boom, that's what gives it its originality. Because all of us as individuals, we all have unique experiences. We all have at least one story to tell that the other person like can't believe, because truth is stranger than fiction. And we all encounter all kinds of unique and wild, eccentric people in our lives.
Hmm.
So I'm just spitting all that stuff back out. And
Right.
I'm able to structure the story in a way that has a beginning, middle, and end. So I have like over 100 of these Lee Hacklins now, and there's a little bit of crossover here and there, but they are mostly self-contained. That's why if you look at my Indigo page, they all say number one, right? That was a mistake, but looking back, it was a happy mistake, because if I wrote Lee Hacklin number 37, I wouldn't want my hypothetical readership. Like I said, I really don't have very much readership to start with right now, but let's say down the road, I wouldn't want anyone to think, oh, I have to read the first 36. No, 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 no. Most of my stories have a beginning, middle, and end. And I like to
Right.
think that I'm good at, and I like to think that I'm good at creating characters that the reader can identify with. And that's why you look at Peanuts and Archie and all these superhero stories they're popular with each new generation. Like there's a reason for that, because they're relatable. We all know a kid like Charlie Brown, right? Or we see ourselves in Charlie Brown, right? And that is the key. To me, story is not as important as character. You can write the most cliched story that everyone's seen a million. Look at Karate Kid, right? Or Titanic. I mean, Titanic is about a rich girl who's engaged to a rich jerk, and she falls in love with a rich boy. Like James Cameron did not invent that story. And I'm saying this with love and respect to James Cameron. I'm a fan of his, and I love Titanic. But if the audience or the readers if they can relate to the character, then they will take that journey with that character. And I like to think that I'm good at that. So far, it's pretty much just me who thinks that way. But one is better than none.
It all turns over very quickly sometimes. So what I'm really interested in here, John, is you've now got more than 100 published books, and you've been writing for, I guess, 4 years. So
That's
that's
right.
an
2019.
incredible number. That's an incredible number of books in such
Thank
a
you.
short period, right? I mean, I've written 2 books myself over that same period of time. 2 books, not over 100. So there's so much that goes into the book, not just the writing. There's the artwork, there's the editing, there's the publishing. How do you manage all of that? Like this is
I
a
love this
book in
question.
2 weeks. Yeah,
This is a one-man enterprise, right?
yeah,
I'm doing everything by myself. I would love to have an editor. I would love to have someone vet all of my books and any inconsistencies, which I'm sure there are tons, or grammatical errors. But I also feel that the imperfections are part. It's art. Artists create art. It's not science, right?
right.
I feel that the imperfect. You can spend 25 years trying to write one book and have it be absolutely perfect. No, 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 no. I think that's completely bananas. Just get it out there, and I guarantee you that your favorite movie, whatever your favorite movie is, has flaws. You go on a website, you type in your favorite movie bloopers. There'll be a whole list like a mile long that you never noticed, and you watch the movie again, and suddenly you notice them. But you didn't care before that because you just enjoyed it so much. So as far as artwork goes, it's only been over the last year or so that I discovered a website called Poster My Wall. It's
Right.
free, it's super easy to use, and that's how I design my book covers. And sometimes I looked at the image, like I saw an image of a nuclear bomb, like a mushroom cloud, and I thought, oh, there's a nuclear bomb in New York City, and Lee has 24 hours to find it. That became Armageddon Down and Boogie, right? And as far as editing goes, yeah, I mean, I would love to have someone look at my. I mean, I sent someone, I emailed someone one of my books, and she read it, and she wrote a nice kind of response, but she's like, whoa, you really need someone to proofread your stuff, because she pointed out, and I was like, I look guilty as charged. I work 40 hours a week. My job is very physically demanding. I lift weights 3 times a week. This is a one-man enterprise. And so I
Yeah.
have it in my mind's eye that at some point I will have maybe a staff. I would love to have a staff to help me with the podcasts, so I
Right.
don't miss a podcast like I did the other day with yourself. or to look at my books and say, hey, you have something in chapter one that doesn't add up to what happened in chapter nine, you know. But you know what, Wayne? I've read a million novels, and some of my favorite novels have inconsistencies. I remember reading a spy thriller. I won't say the name of the author because he passed away, but there was a spy whose code name was London. Okay. You turn the page, his code name is England. And I remember I was flipping the page back. I was going back and forth. "Well, did they change the code name? Like, am I missing something here?" It's like, no, it's a mistake. It's a mistake. That's art. You don't want to have too many, right? Because there's a tipping point, right? Where it's like, oh, you might lose the reader. But at the end of the day, I like to think that my stories are emotionally satisfying. I mean, that's how I feel about them. I try to add a little bit of everything.
Right.
There's humor, there's mystery, sometimes it's romance for Lee. Very little sexuality. I discovered that I'm not interested. I think Lee, I have like one sex scene in all of my Lee Hacklins because I discovered that writing that stuff is incredibly boring. He touched her here, she touched him. They're like, ugh. It's like, not interested in that at all. What I'm interested in mainly is character dynamics. I love the way Lee, like, here's an example. I wrote a character who has half a phobia. Do you know what that is? That's fear of being touched.
Okay.
So Lee has a lot of fun with this guy initially. He's like poking him, and he's like, what would you do if you saw a school bus full of kids and it was on fire? You wouldn't go there and rescue them, right? Because you have fear of being touched. And so Lee is mocking him throughout the story, but then towards the end of the story, he reveals that he was sexually abused as a boy, and that's why he has half a phobia. So of course Lee's attitude is like, oh, geez, well, I'm not a mind reader. So again, I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was sexually abused until towards the end of the book. Like very often, I don't even know who the killer is. I wrote one
Right.
book called Judgment Days, which is about a serial killer of judges. And spoiler warning, Lee is married in that one. He has a son, and of course, the son and his wife are kidnapped by the villain. And Lee's off in his car to rescue them. I still didn't know who the killer was. Like, that's the way that I write. And then I went to chapter one. It's like, oh, it's this guy. And it made sense. And I didn't have to change anything. But just to
Right.
answer your question, it's like, yeah, I'm doing everything by myself. And if I didn't have to work, if I was better at saving money, if I had a huge, a pile of cash that I could live off for a couple of years and just do this, it would be great. But I'm doing the best that I can. And I'm manifesting my dreams 1,000% more than what I was doing before 2019. This is what I was meant to do with my life. Every time I open my notebook, I can't get the words down fast enough. I can't fix a car. I can't shingle a roof. I can't throw a ball. If I threw a ball, it would land behind me. This is what I can do. And I think I think Mark Wahlberg said it best in Boogie Nights. He said, everybody has one thing. Some people have many, many things, right? Really all you need is one. And to all your listeners out there, if you feel like that you're not good at anything, and I absolutely know how that feels, then just go with what you like, right? Like, what do you like? Okay. Do you like baseball? Then do a podcast about baseball, right? Take advantage. I can't believe that everybody should have a podcast, even if it's just like once a month. You could talk about politics, you could talk about your favorite movie, whatever. I can't believe more and more people of our generation, because I'm probably older than you are. I don't know, I'm 58. I don't know how old you are. That more and more people don't take advantage of this technology. I took a picture of myself holding a book of an author named Mike Madden. And Mike is one of the writers of the Jack Ryan series. He took over the reins of the Jack Ryan series after Tom Clancy passed away. And I told him about my group page, Johnny's Way. Well, guess what? He joined. This guy's a best-selling author, and he joined my Facebook group page. Like, this is the world that we're living in. I think it's a golden age. Never mind
Yeah.
COVID and all the nuttiness and madness of the world. As far as I'm concerned, this is a golden age of opportunity for people like myself who are late bloomers.
Very good. So you've mentioned your main character, which is Lee Hacklin. He's a private
Yes,
investigator, but you also have another prominent character, the urban tiger. So
yes.
where did he grow from?
Okay. When I hear other people say the names of my characters, it gives me a feeling. It just gives me such a feeling in my solar plexus of joy. Okay, the urban tiger is a 15-year-old boy named Tommy Ryder. And have you seen the movie Kick Ass about the boy who wants to be a superhero? He doesn't have powers or anything like that. Do you know that movie?
I don't
Okay.
know.
It's anyway, it was based on a comic book. And I remember when I saw the comic book, it broke my heart because I had the same idea for so many years about a boy, a teenage boy who's a got he wants to be a good Samaritan, right? He doesn't have superpowers, nothing like that. He reads comic books and he says, "Hey, I'd like to do that." Like you know how superheroes always have a very dramatic motivation to do what they do, right? Like Superman comes to Earth to redeem humanity. Bruce Wayne's parents were murdered when he was a boy, right? What if a kid just decided to do it because he wants to be a good Samaritan? So I said, you know what? I want to do this. I wrote a Lee Hacklin short story called The Urban Tiger, where I introduced that character. And what happens is Lee is chasing after a mugger, and this kid pops out of nowhere and he's wearing a mask and he's got the UT on his t-shirt, like drawn on with a felt pen or something. And he beats up the mugger and he hands the victim her purse back. And Lee takes him to a McDonald's and buys him a hamburger. And it's like, hey kid, what are you doing? You know, you're gonna get yourself killed. Like, stop doing this. And I discovered, you know what, I really like this kid. And so I decided to write a series of books called The Urban Tiger. He has a sister named Molly Ryder. Of course, she's the urban tigress, and they go out once or twice a month. They run around Times Square trying to help people, and they just run into some really, you know, I also created a kind of a spin-off series called Lee Hackley and Urban Tiger, where they team
Mm,
up. I've written a few of those, and they have a kind of a big brother, little brother type of relationship. But I think I've written the final chapter on that series for the time being. I wrote about, I think there's 19 or so. They're
right.
they're a little bit more serialized because the kids are getting older, and I think they were like 25 or 26 in the last one. I said, you know what? I put these kids through one hardship after another. I just want them to have a happy ending. I
Yeah.
actually wrote a scene where one of Tommy's friends, Mark Dixon, is paralyzed. I had him shot and he was going to be paralyzed. That's the thing. You become emotionally attached to your characters. They're like your family. They're like your children. And I discovered that I could do it. I just could do it. So I think I'm done with that series. But that's another one. And then I wrote another trilogy called Training Montages, which is about a an ex-convict who's on parole, and he was meant to be a heavyweight champion of the world, but he killed a guy. But his condition is that he can't box. If he boxes in any way, shape, or form, he'll be sent back to prison. So it's a bit that one is a bit like Karate Kid meets Goodfellas meets Rocky. That's a trilogy. And then I also wrote. I'm working on the book that I'm working on right now is called "The Fearless, the Wicked, and the Righteous," which is a bit like Treehouse Avengers about a young man during the 1970s who grows up in a small town who wants to be a comic book artist. So you know, I don't when I just start with a general idea and I'm off and running. And then, as I said earlier, the Taking of Red Star One, books 1 and 2, is
Right.
basically the Hunt for Red October meets Star Trek, which I can't believe nobody's done. I remember I actually Googled that to see if I would get a hit, and I didn't. And that really comes from watching that movie back in the day and thinking, God, gosh, this is great, but wouldn't it be cooler if it was a spaceship that everybody was chasing after instead of a submarine? So, I mean, that's what writers are doing a lot of the time. They're just asking, what if?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you just put it down, put your brain down on that laptop and put it out there. And if everyone thinks it, and I always tell myself this, if I knew in advance that everybody in the world thought I was the world's worst writer or that I had no talent whatsoever, I would still do it. I absolutely would still do it because there's nothing more satisfying in life, I feel. And again, this is just my opinion. I'm not dogmatic about this stuff. There's nothing more satisfying than the act of creation, the feeling of that you left something behind that, at least theoretically, barring an asteroid, that might last forever and ever. It might be a table that you built with your bare hands, or in your case, you procreated, but you left something behind so that you know that your life meant something.
Had a
And we
purpose.
need to have purpose in our lives in order for our life to have meaning. So before 2019, my purpose in life was really just to keep myself afloat, you know, keep my head above the water. Pardon me. And I was satisfied with that because I just
Mm.
didn't believe in myself.
So
After
what
like
are your aspirations then for
I'm sorry.
what are the aspirations for writing and the future? Like you're looking to eventually win some sort of literary award, you want a
No,
bestseller,
no.
perhaps play the
My
lead a number of greats one movies or something. Like what's
I
the
wouldn't
aspiration?
complain if I won an award, but no, my the bell that I want to ring, as I said earlier, is I want to see these characters in other formats. Um,
Right.
there was a comic book artist. I've reached out to a lot of comic book artists because I would love to do graphic novel. I would love to collaborate with an artist on a graphic, like an Urban Tiger graphic novel. Oh
Right.
gosh, boy, oh boy, that would be like winning the lottery. And never mind winning the lottery. That would be the real life lottery for me. But I wanna have a conversation with a young, handsome actor and say, Brad, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is you're gonna die someday. The good news is you're Lee Hacklin. You're gonna have to grow your hair, you're gonna have to feather it back, right? You're gonna have to like 70s music, right? That's the bell that I want to ring. And that's why I'm doing these podcasts. Well, look,
Right.
the reason I'm doing these podcasts, again, I love hanging out with fellow people who believe in themselves as much as I do, right? I also want to inspire other people who are late bloomers like myself, but it's also about self promotion. Like I said, I want to connect with that one person who can make a Lee Hacklin streaming series happen or an Urban Tiger series. I absolutely have faith that my stories, like winning awards and all that stuff, probably not. But I like to think at the bare minimum that they're not boring. I mean, I have to imagine that all of us have seen a movie that was made by super talented people that cost $300 million. And you look at the movie that you paid to see, and you thought, gosh, I could go home tonight and I could write a screenplay about my last argument with my wife or my spouse, and it would be more interesting than this CG Gonzo fest that I just wasted my money on. I'm sure all of us feel that way sometimes, but not all of us will actually do it. And that's
Yeah.
another reason why I'm writing, because I look at movies today, and look, I'm very few now. I spend very little time watching movies now because I'd rather create than just passively watch other people's manifestations. And I don't mean to get on my high horse about this, but I feel like a lot of filmmakers today, they're 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 just kind of woke and preachy, and like I saw The Last Jedi in the theater and I thought, gosh, this movie's fun to look at, but it's basically, I feel like I'm looking at anti-male propaganda. Like I just feel like there's a political agenda or there's some sort of subversion going on, and that's not what I'm writing. I'm writing the kinds of stories that I grew up watching as a kid, right? The morals in my stories I feel are very, and they do have morals, but they're universal, right? They're not based on a political, they're more philosophical. I try to keep my stories philosophical because or if I do get into a hot button issue like abortion, I've touched on it like just as an example, I'll try to be fair to both sides because that's not my, at the end of the day, all I'm trying to do is entertain.
Mm.
And so I feel like I'm filling a void that is out there. And I'm sure that there are other writers out there who are doing the same thing. Again, we're just creating worlds that we want to see in other formats. So that, look at J.K. Rowling. She started Harry Potter. She just scribbled some notes on a paper napkin, as the story goes, right? And that's the bell that I want to ring. And
Yeah.
creating also, creating an industry, you creating jobs for other people, you creating opportunities for other people who are also have that creative spirit. So that's, winning, like I said, winning an award. Yeah, it'd be wonderful. I'd be absolutely, the Edgar Allan Poe award goes to John Leister. Okay, yeah, thank you, that's very nice. But really what I want is okay, here's what I want. I'm trying to nail this down. I want my creativity to be my main source of income. That's my ultimate goal. I don't think about being super wealthy. I'm not materialistic. I don't mean to sound pious or anything like that. But I just, my main source of income now is the service industry. And I like my job. I enjoy the people that I work with. It's very physically demanding and I like it. But I'm on the journey. I'm on this journey. And if it doesn't happen for me at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because at least I'm going for it. At least I'm trying and having fun along the way. And again, I don't have to will myself to do it. The only thing that I don't like about myself right now is I feel like I sleep more than I need to. When I get up in the morning, I snooze, snooze, snooze. I need to stop doing that because life is too short. And so, anyway, that's my story in a nutshell. And I'm sorry that I gab so much.
Not a
I have a
problem,
tendency
John.
to feel about your.
What lessons have you learned along the way that on that journey that you think would be useful sharing with the listeners?
Well, I mean, I don't know what else I can add that I haven't already said. What I didn't realize before 2019, again, is how much more fun my life is now versus the way that I was living before 2019, where I was spending so much time on the couch. I thought I was having fun then. Like I said, this little moment, yeah, I'd have little moments of clarity, like, hey, what are you doing? You're wasting your life. But if you're living your life like a drug addict, which I was, I mean, I wasn't breaking into people's cars to support my quote unquote habit of junk food and DVDs. But when you put all your eggs in one basket, what you're doing is you're selling your soul. You're trading your soul for instant gratification. And what I've learned since 2019 is, again, I'm repeating myself now, but what I've learned is that there's a difference between happiness and pleasure. I mean, this is something that Anthony Robbins has been talking about for years and years. There's a huge gulf between the two. What makes me happy is creating, again, reaching out to people like yourself who are fellow bliss manifestors, and being around that positive energy. And okay, here's something maybe that's a little different that I haven't already said. I've discovered that I really have very little patience for people who kind of want to put me in a straitjacket. I mean, here's an example. I had someone once say to me, "Don't talk." I was in a social setting, and this guy that I'm very close to, he said to me, "Don't talk about your books." Like, I never want to be around. I've really minimalized my contact. This is the same guy that told me acting was a waste of time when we were young. So I shouldn't have been surprised. But some people, they're not evil people necessarily. They might have their own contributions to make, but they're not visionaries. They can't see beyond the end of their own noses. I think they're very practically minded people, which is great in some ways. But they seem to think, well, if you're working hard at something and there isn't a guarantee down the road that isn't going to make you a big pile of cash, then it's a waste of time. And of course, that's their philosophy, and it works for them, but it's not mine. And I find it's very hard for the two to coexist in the same room. So I've discovered that I don't need to. I love hearing about other people's success stories. I love hearing about other people, or if they're just starting out. Yeah, I started writing a book last night. That's great. Congratulations. Like, I never want to feel that I'm constricted or restricted in some way in any social setting. Now, work's different. When I'm at work, I'm expected to play the role that I'm expected to play. So I allow for that because it pays for my rent, right? I have to do that. But outside of work, I just want to be me. I just want to be myself, like Popeye. I am what I am, and I want people around me, like yourself, to feel that they can be themselves and that they're not going to be criticized, they're not going to be judged, they're just going to be accepted, and that we're all rooting for each other and inspiring each other, to live our lives the way that we're meant to live our lives and to not procrastinate,
Perfect.
right?
So, so John, you're very active on Facebook, as you mentioned, Johnny's Way, I think it's called. Where is the best place for listeners to go, to follow, to connect, to
Okay.
engage with?
Well, I mean, that's basically it. My group page is called Johnny's Way, over 700 members. My Indigo page, if you go to indigo.ca and type in John Leister, you can look at all my books. They're all excerpted, easy for me to say, excerpted. Um, but I've done this before, time permitting. If anyone is interested in any of my books or short stories, I would be more than happy to email it to them. I've done this a few times and I've gotten some wonderful feedback from people. My email is johnleister, JOHNLEISTER, small letters, 611 at hotmail.com. And as I said, time permitting, if anyone is interested, I would be more than willing to email. Look, I want to make money doing this. It's my goal to be a professional writer of creative fiction. This is what I want. But I also want to share. And as I said earlier, when I saw that Mickey Spillane comment on Facebook, like, holy moly, I mean, the feeling that gives me, you can't put a price on that. It'd be nice to have the best of both worlds, but I'll take one over none.
Yeah,
So that's,
fantastic.
that's basically it. If you go to YouTube and if you type in John Leister author, I've been a guest on a few other podcasts, and it's mostly the same stuff.
Okay.
So that's basically it. And yeah, I love hearing feedback from people and fellow writers, or anybody who's thinking about doing what I'm doing. If they want some advice, I'll be happy to give it to them. I was on another podcast and the host said to me that he took a 12-week course on self-publishing. And I was like, what? No, 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 no. You just do it. You just go on the darn website and you register. It takes all of 5 minutes. You get your USB stick and you plug it in and you upload your book. And again, like I said earlier, I recommend Draft to Digital. I've never had any hiccups with them. It took me all of 5 minutes to post my, other than adding, you have to set up the banking information. That takes a little bit of time. But every time I uploaded a book to Draft to Digital, it takes all of 5 minutes. And look, I have something now. I have a legacy. I have something now that I can point to and feel really good about. And that's why I have these feelings of self-confidence now that I didn't have before. Everyone out there, please follow your bliss, because at a certain point it is too late. Our lives are fragile, our lives are finite, but you look at Norman Lear, he's the creator of All in the Family. He's in his 90s, he's still working in television, right? How many stories have we heard about people who retired and then they passed away like 2-3 years later, right? I mean, I remember hearing those stories more so as a younger man, because I think now fewer and fewer people are retiring. Because why would you retire? When you retire, then you're turning your back just for a life of leisure. It'd be Adam and Eve. It'd be fun for a little while, but it'd be like a vacation that goes on for too long. We need to have purpose. And so that's my story in a nutshell. Thank you.
Well, John Leister, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're extremely passionate. That's clear about what you're doing, and you're a ball of energy. Thanks for being a guest on the ET project. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate it 1,000,000,000,000,000%. Thank you.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.